Hey everybody, Huju here, and you're looking at my basement workshop. And the final touches, or the final parts of the repair that I'm going to be doing today on my Harbor Freight P51 Mustang. I actually crashed this thing probably a little more than a month ago, and finishing up the repairs today. I started a couple of days ago. It's not that difficult, I just really never got around to doing it. I decided that I might as well just document this repair. This is actually the fourth time I've done a repair on this airplane. And I figured there are other people out there who have planes similar to this that want to know how they can repair them. So I decided to do this video, and I'm going to include some still pictures that I had taken a while back of this plane before it's had its accidents and after this last accident. This is a new build right out of the box, and this one is repair after the second accident. This latest accident split the nose right up to the canopy, spreading it apart, leaving the motor and the mount hanging out the front end by the ECS wiring. The split on the bottom didn't go back as far, therefore the wing was undamaged, thankfully. Amazingly, the motor and the gearbox and mount came out in one piece and was not damaged at all. Okay, so where we're at now on this repair, after you've seen all those pictures, I had taken, of course, the receiver out. It's sitting over here on the table. I took it out so that when I put this front end in boiling water to expand it and get it back into its original shape, that I wouldn't get any steam damage, or vapor damage to the receiver. I kept it in the water too long, and when I dried it out, it reshaped itself fine to where it needed to be. In fact, this tape didn't even need to be on there to hold it in place. It almost resealed itself over a few days, but with all those bubbled up foam, I had to take some sandpaper and sand it all down so that it wouldn't look like an alligator out there on the front end of the airplane. After gluing the front end, the nose back together, I just put the tape on there to hold it in place while it's curing. I didn't really expect it to separate because it wanted to stay in place. Today what I did was I started to replace some of the foam areas that were damaged. If you remember the picture of the front end, the still photo, the lower bulkhead was partially ripped out, and of course the space for the stick mount was separated. I needed to put a new piece in there for that lower bulkhead because I wanted to reinforce the fuselage where it was before. I actually had that piece in there glued before from another accident, so it's the second time I put one in there. What you're looking at here is inside the canopy area, that front bulkhead. It's kind of offset. You really can't see it here. It's an offset bulkhead. And on the left there is where the battery usually sits. That also had a hole in it because the stick mount was pushed back through it. It had a hole at the face of that bulkhead, and this little side piece I kind of stuck in there. There was a hole on the side. So I put another piece of foam in there, probably about 1/8, maybe a little more than 1/8 of an inch thick, up against that bulkhead where the hole was, and a smaller piece along the side. And that will cover the hole up, and the battery will slide in there. I've slid it in there a couple of times just to get it to fit into place. Here is my stick mount for the motor. I got it all cleaned up. It had a lot of torn up foam and glue stuck to it. You might remember from an earlier photograph. I get the glue all scraped off and the chunks of foam removed, and I sanded it down, not into the plastic, just as close to it as I could get. Got it all cleaned up. Put another spacer I have on the back. I had that from a previous accident. I had moved the bulkhead back enough to where it moved the stick mount too far aft. So I've since been putting this bulkhead or spacer in there out of foam. against a new bulkhead that I put in. So when I put the stick mount in place, as far back as it will go, it will be where it should be, sticking out the front of the part of the engine, enough to where the spinner and the prop shaft will clear the engine itself. So I'm going to put glue on the top of it, the very top surface and both sides, and maybe a dab on the back. But we're going to slide it in here after we get the glue on, and these little black marker lines I have up there, the smallest one is where I want the stick mount to end. That's where I want the stick mount to end, right about there. Okay, there it is, glued into place. I did slide the gearbox on it after it set up a little bit, just to ensure that I had the right angle on it, at least a sufficient angle on it, so that it will work fine when I put it back together. So I'm going to let that cure, and then the only thing we have left to do, put some filler in. Before I put the color on it, of course, before I paint it, I'm going to put some filler in on these torn up areas. And then put the gearbox and speed controller back in, and then the prop back in, and get this thing all ready to do a little ground test. Okay, here we are. This is what I just did. A little bit of time lapse between my last take and this. I put the filler in. If you look in the nose here, I put a piece of packing tape in along that contour on the right is a backing tape. Packing tape for backing tape. How's that? And then I put the filler in where it was broken out. I gave it the contour that it's supposed to have. It's supposed to be a little bit inside on the bottom, just like that. I think I gave it back on this side with the filler. I used some filler and filled in the areas on the fuselage that had the cracking. You can see the white lines where the filler is in there. I put filler on top. I packed it into the crevices, did the gaps on the seam too. And once I got it packed into the crevices, I dipped my finger in some water and smoothed it out. Wiped it off, all the excess off, so there's no excess on here. You can't even see it on this side. There was I filled in a little crack spot on that side as well. Then I cleaned off all the excess. Then I took it outside in the sun and I let this thing dry for about a half an hour. So now the only thing left to do, take some light sandpaper, maybe some 300 grit, 400 grit, sand that area where there's a little bit of surface filler dried on top, sand this section smooth, and then start painting it. Give her color back so she looks like a new airplane. After that, I'll start putting back the inside. Oh, and this is the filler that I used. It's a Hobby Light filler. And you take it off and it's kind of a paste form. You just kind of put it on, smudge it on and smooth it out, and then sand off or wipe off the excess. Then we'll put this back together after we paint it. Here's the gearbox with the brushless in-runner motor for 4100 kV mounted to a gearbox, which mounts to the stick mount, and that end, of course, the prop end shaft sticks out the front of the airplane. You do want to make sure, and I do this with all my airplanes, my other P-51 just like this, and I even did it with this. Every few flights, take off the spinner, put a screwdriver on those engine mounts, and just make sure they are still tight. Sometimes you have to snug them a little bit because the vibrations cause screws to loosen up. Even the little screw that secures the gearbox to the stick mount, which you access through one of those lightning holes. You got to check that once in a while. But every 3 or 4 flights you want to do that. That keeps these engine mounts from coming loose and having failures, mechanical failures, which you don't want.